Welcome to In the Garden. I'm your host, Joyce Hochsprung, and I have Debbie Kaharski and Tanya Vosik here with me. And they're going to help out, and we're going to do a format today where we asked for questions on the Hutch, Minnesota Gardening Enthusiast Facebook page, and we're going to answer those questions that we received today. Okay, today's topic we're going to talk about, it's basically foundations of a healthy harvest, and whether that's your vegetable garden or your flower beds, kind of one and the same. So we're going to talk about a few different scenarios.
Okay.
I'm going to start out with fertilizing, and Debbie's going to start out with that one.
Okay, Deb. What is a soil test?
A soil test is when you go through your garden and you pick different patches of soil. You can send it into the University of Minnesota and they'll research it. You do a couple different areas of your lawn so you get an overall basic of what your lawn is or your ground is like. And then within I think it's up to 4 weeks it may take them, they send you back analysis and they will tell you the health of your soil. And they will also give you information that needed to help your soil better, to amend it, to fertilize it, what to add to it, to make it more productive. And you can put in there if you want to do it for a lawn or where you want to do it for a vegetable or flower garden. And it will help you, hopefully, to a better harvest.
So that's what it means, basically.
Yes.
Is the soil test easy to read?
Yes, it is. They will tell you, like you'll get a sheet, at least at the University of Minnesota, and it will tell you like specific things like your phosphorus, your potassium, and the pH of your soil. And then they will recommend, this particular test I'm looking at was for a vegetable garden. So they will tell you what fertilizer is recommended for your lawn. And then you may not be able to get exactly what they're saying because your lawn, I mean, they only make fertilizer in certain formulations. You just want to get the one that's closest to what the university has said that matches this. The most important thing to look after is the nitrogen of your soil. That's the most important element.
Will the nitrogen be given on the soil test?
No, it's not.
And that's because it moves through the soil quickly. So if we have a really rainy spring like we did last spring where a lot of the nitrogen just kind of washed through the soil. So in cases like that, you're better off putting on smaller amounts but more frequently, or if you have real sandy soil maybe.
Okay. What's the difference between a slow release fertilizer and a liquid release fertilizer?
Well, a slow release fertilizer, when you put it in there, it's what it says. It will slowly release the nutrients. The cons of that, the soil temperature has to be 70 degrees for that to begin working. So therefore, in our season, it could be June or July, it could be May. We just never know exactly what it is. And the fast acting, the water soluble ones, that's it. It fast acts. It goes directly in liquid form onto your plants. And so you get faster results.
Okay. What about organic versus inorganic?
Okay, so organic fertilizer is, it means it's derived from once living plants or animals. So it's your compost, your bone meal, your cottonseed. That is a little bit more slow acting. It takes a little bit longer for that to take an effect on your plants. And the commercial one is what it is. It's synthesized materials that are mined, that are made up. One of the advantage of the commercial is it'll act quicker. It is more, when it's, I guess the solution or the formulation of the fertilizer is more balanced, more concentrated. I think the inorganic can be a little bit either way. Yeah, it's just
and
not.
sometimes the organic, it's harder to track how much of a nutrient you're getting in some cases.
Yes.
Some will have a, a good breakdown listed, but you don't always know. What about cost?
In organic does cost more. So if that's one of your things, you're going to want to look at that, the cost, because the commercial. And another thing to note, it doesn't matter what brand you're using. Your plants don't care if you're using Miracle Grow or the generic brand. They're just looking at the nutrients. So it's not necessary to buy the name brand product.
And
When you say that, does that come into play with that NPK ratio?
They're all going to have the same.
They're all gonna have
They're
the
all
same.
going to have the
Doesn't
same
matter.
nutrient. Right, right.
Okay.
they're gonna, yeah. If it says 5, 10, 5 on it,
5, 10,
doesn't.
That's what it has to be.
That's
Yep.
what it's going to be.
Right, right. It's not going to, one brand doesn't. Generic,
Yeah.
right. They're all the
Doesn't
same.
matter.
Right.
And do your plants prefer one over the other?
No. They don't care.
They don't know the difference.
They're not as picky as we are.
Your soil may prefer organic.
Right.
Might make for a healthier
A more
soil with
natural.
some of the things that you work in. But your plants really aren't going to know the difference.
Okay, great. So is it still very important to read that package?
Yes.
Read
to
the
read,
package.
to look at your NPK, so it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And one thing to know too is what the different elements mean. Nitrogen, all plants need nitrogen. Nitrogen is probably the number one element that you need. A lack of nitrogen would be, like your leaves are turning yellow on your plants. The whole plant turns pale green and it just doesn't look really good. But as in all cases, too much fertilizer can burn your plant, can damage your plants. You really have to be wary of that. The phosphorus stimulates root growth and hastens blooming. So they say like, if you're growing tomatoes or flowers and you're looking for those blooms, you might want to look for a fertilizer that's higher in phosphorus, and that's that middle number.
Is that dependent on your soil test? I mean,
Somewhat, yes.
because do all soils need extra potassium?
No. There again, that soil test is very
Soil
important.
test is very important.
Yeah, and it said if you can't or find that you can't afford or you don't want to do a soil test, always follow the directions on the package. If in doubt, always follow by what they say. The potassium is used, that can increase the resistance to drought, which of course we've experienced quite a bit in the last couple of years, and possibly helps with some disease controlling.
Okay,
So,
well, that's good. Now, what about my containers?
okay,
I'm not in the ground, I'm containers.
right. That's a
like doing
whole
that.
different story.
Okay.
Because as we know around here, sometimes the need to water containers could be 2 to 3 times a day on those hot, windy days, So you can start a lot of your soil mixes, have a slow release fertilizer in them. There again, it doesn't begin working till the soil is 70 degrees, and that constant watering is going to wash the fertilizer right out of the plant in the pot, so you're not going to have anything. Plus, they're competing for roots because they're in a small container on that. So probably 2 to 3 weeks after you plant it, it's not a bad idea, it's a good idea to throw in some of that water soluble because it feeds the leaves, it feeds it right away, and they can get the nutrients that it needs quickly. Because that makes them for a longer, healthier looking season for those.
Okay. I've also heard something called garden tea.
That,
What is it?
it's basically a tea that you make out of compost. It is highly controversial, I have found. There's not been a lot of scientific studies on it as of yet. And so some of the concerns is that you don't know what the concentrates are, especially if it's a home-brewed compost. You don't know what the nutrients are. There's concerns that in home stuff, it doesn't get hot enough. you could be bringing in pathogens like E. coli and salmonella if you're using it on your vegetables. So if you're gonna look at compost tea, I would highly recommend doing a research to make your own decisions, because you can go on one end and it's absolutely not, to, well, it's okay, or I wouldn't use it on my vegetable plants, but for flowers maybe. So the
Yeah.
best thing is just research it and come up with your own
'Cause
conclusions.
you do need to know what you're doing when you're making that. You need an aeration system to keep oxygen moving through it. So if that sounds like something you don't think you want to mess with, it might be best to leave that alone.
There are some, I don't know if around here, but there are some commercially made compost tea that might be better. But then again, the thing is just research it and see how comfortable you feel.
Maybe for more an advanced gardener,
Yes, or see
not
if,
maybe a beginning gardener.
right?
Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and there's one thing to remember. I mean, if you have a healthy soil,
You
your use of fertilizer is
Much less.
yes,
Yes. Yes.
and maybe you don't even need to use that much of it. So
Okay. All right. What about soil amendments? What does that do, and where does that typically go on our soil?
most of the ones that we readily think of, you can just put on top of your soil. Some of it you mix into the first 4 or 5 inches, and that can also act as some fertilizer. It just breaks down much slower.
It improves the soil structure,
Yes.
Okay.
and some of them will feed as well. So.
Yes. And so improving your soil structure, then, you can hopefully get some better, the microbial, I can't even say it.
Microbial.
Microbial, the healthier parts in your soil to feed your plants, to do whatever it helps.
Okay. So when we talk soil amendments, what are some of the common ones?
Some of the ones that you might compost.
Okay.
That's a great soil
Yes,
amendment.
yeah, you can always put that on.
You can
mix
work it in, you can put it on top, you can side dress. It's many uses.
Yes, different ways. You can also use another one, manure.
Aged manure.
Yes, don't put fresh one in there. Make sure it's aged, because the fresh
Well
manure could
composted.
burn your plants.
And if you're using it in your vegetable garden, you want to make sure it's composted, thoroughly composted, so to where it looks like dirt, so that you aren't bringing in salmonella or botulism or any of the other little nasties.
And another very simple one that probably a lot of people use already is wood mulch. You're putting mulch around your gardens and your beds. Eventually that will break down into your soil and it will improve it. It helps aerate it, and especially around here we have a lot of clay, so that's very beneficial, and it's price-wise it's a cheaper alternative. Some people can make chips. If you live on a farm or have access to it, you can put wood mulch and chips down from trees, but make sure anything that you put on there is not diseased.
The coconut.
Coconut, the coconut coir. Don't know how available that is around here either. I've not used it, but it helps.
It helps break up the soil. Like if you've got a heavy soil, it works similar to peat moss.
Okay, yeah.
But you do want to watch to make sure the package says that it has been rinsed or washed or whatever, because and it's natural. Well, they're both in their natural form, so that's not quite right. But some of them contain salt. If you think about where coconut trees grow, and so the coconut coir often contains salt. So if it hasn't been rinsed and you put that in your soil, you could have problems. So and it should say on the package.
What about straw?
Straw is another good thing. A lot of people use it to cover up their plants in the fall.
Yep.
Use it for displays, for Halloween season. That's another good one to put on top. You can work it in, but I say a lot of these you just put on top, and eventually it will break down. Will it be overnight? No.
No.
But they're all good things to put in your soil. You could also try adding some vermiculite or perlite. The disadvantages of those, of course, is the cost. It's going to be more
expensive.
Yeah, a lot more
if you're
expensive.
doing
More
any
expensive.
large area.
Yeah, if you look at how much a bag of that costs. But those are some other alternatives of things that you could use to lighten up your soil.
Would
and
those go on top or be worked in?
those would need to be worked in.
Okay.
So a little bit more work than the previous ones that we could just lay on the top.
Blood meal?
Blood meal is another thing there. Again, though, you look at the size, small size of a bag of blood meal, but it is a good thing to put in your soil. I mean, it's got a lot of,
Nutrients?
Nutrients.
Yeah,
It's a
nutrients
high
and stuff.
nitrogen.
yeah.
Okay.
That gives you nitrogen. So
And bone meal?
Bone meal, again, something you buy and you work into the soil. It's very beneficial.
it's
And
got that's a source of phosphorus and I think calcium.
Okay. And then what about ornamental sulfur?
The elemental
Elemental sulfur.
sulfur. Our soil pH generally around here, and if you don't know what your pH is, you should get a soil test and find out. I mean, there are always pockets. You can never go, oh, the whole county is this, but generally we range from, and here in McLeod, we range from neutral, which is 7 pH, to slightly alkaline. So, and we know a lot of plants prefer a slightly acidic in that 6.8 range or so. So if you've got something that likes some more acidic soil, you may want to use elemental sulfur, but keep in mind it is slow acting. I mean, we're talking it might be 6 months to a year before you start seeing results. So I have a couple of trees that would prefer a more acidic soil than what I have. And my water is also, I have a high pH water. So if I have to water them, that, kind of, it's like, oh, yeah, okay. But so I'll just take a handful or two of the soil sulfur and throw it around the drip line in the spring each year.
Okay. I hear something called leaf mold.
leaf mold, and that's
What is that?
It's exactly what it is. It's leaf. You
Okay.
collect your leaves in the fall, and you can put them on your beds. I know that if you mulch them before you put them on your gardens, it will break down faster. If I live in the city, I don't have a place to put a big pile of leaves. So if I choose to save, put it in plastic bags over the winter, and punch holes in them, so then you can start the decomposition there. But I don't have room. If I put it all in my gardens, I think I'd smother them. So, but that's an excellent source.
Yeah, when you see pictures of leaf ninjas going around neighborhoods and picking up bags of leaves, that's why they're doing it. They want to make leaf mold. So if you can shred it up and pile it up, by the next year, by the spring, it'll be ready to use. If you don't shred it, it might take it 2 years, and you get this nice humus-like stuff from it.
Okay. Okay, here's another controversial thing. What about coffee grounds, eggshells, and Epsom salts? What about all that? Can I use that? Can I not use that? Do I compost? I mean, what's the story?
Sure.
What's the story?
Okay, coffee grounds. I've seen people say, oh, that'll acidify your soil. No, it won't, because once you brew it, the acid is brewed out of it. Is it still great for your soil? Sure, but put it in your compost pile.
Okay.
Let it break down with the other stuff. If you pile it up around your plants, it's probably just going to get moldy and yucky, and better off to throw it in the compost. So it's not going to lower your pH. I've also seen people saying they can use it for slugs and snails, and I'm like, no, that's really not going to do anything. They're going to crawl right over it. Does nothing to stop them. But yeah, if you want to lower your pH, use the elemental or soil sulfur. Be careful not to use the ammonium sulfate. Well, you can use it, but use it sparingly, because that acts very quickly and it can burn your plants. So I like to just leave that one alone and not use it, and use the slower acting.
Okay. What about eggshells?
Again, throw them in your compost. Yes, they contain calcium, but to be honest, our soils around here contain plenty of calcium. So if you're talking about blossom end rot on your tomatoes, It's not because there's a lack of calcium. It's because there's inconsistent watering, and sometimes we can't really do much about that when it rains every other day. You just have to live with it. But yeah, put it in your soil. By the time eggshells break down enough in the soil, it'll be at least another year. So you're better off again throwing that in your compost.
Okay. Epsom salts or other kind of salts.
Yeah, just don't.
There's
I
that
know.
myth
There's
about
it's a myth.
Epsom salts in when you
Yeah.
plant a tomato plant, and it's going to
Yeah.
Yeah.
help your.
I mean, if your
Yeah.
soil test shows that you're low on magnesium, fine, but our soils, that's usually in really sandy soils. It's
Okay.
not going to be the case here, so just leave it alone.
Also, if you look at some of your fertilizers are specifically made for plants. Like there is a fertilizer for tomato
Tomatoes,
plants. There's
yeah.
a fertilizer for
They're
petunias
blended for
for that plant. And
if you
what it
want to
needs.
get really specific.
Yes.
So
Okay. So when it comes to then pruning, and because we just talked about leaves, it's in the fall. Now we're going to talk about pruning and
this
What's-
is
chop and drop. Chop and drop.
I mainly use this in my flower beds. When I'm cleaning up in the spring, I just whack them off, and at least until I run out of space, they just get dropped on the bare soil between my plants
Okay.
and let them break down there. Now, if I had something that was diseased, I hopefully cut that back in the fall and got it out of there. Or if I had something that was really had a bug issue this year before, because a lot of times they will lay eggs in the stems of those plants, then I probably also want to get it out of there and either bury it in the compost or burn it. So,
Okay.
but it's basically just leaving stuff where it falls.
Leaving it. Okay. So with that, what are some good general guidelines about pruning?
Well, we're going to talk about pruning mainly in relation to disease prevention.
Okay.
If you have something that's, whether it's a tree or a shrub or a perennial, if you don't have good air circulation, your chances of disease are increasing because you need that good air circulation so after the plants get wet, they can dry off. If they're kept moist for too long, then you're talking about getting diseases in there. Anytime you've got a water sprout, something coming up from the base, you take that off. If you've got branches that are crossed or rubbing against each other, you want to remove one of those. Any broken or dead branches, just look at where can you open it up a little bit to let air move through. And that's true whether it's a tree, a shrub, or your perennial plants. Maybe you have to divide that plant. It's getting too crowded. Okay, that's a good time to divide it. So just kind of watch that. The university has some great pictures and information on tree pruning. We're kind of getting into the later part of it. Hopefully you've got that done. Mm-hmm. And some things like oaks, from now until like the end of November, end of October, early November, don't. If you have a broken branch in a storm, prune it off. And then immediately, and this is the only time I'll ever tell you to do this, is slap some latex paint on the cut, but only if you have to prune during we'll call it the unsafe pruning period for oaks, is pretty much April 1st to October 31st. That's when the insects that carry oak wilt disease are out and about. And they can find a fresh cut within 10 minutes. So when I say put this, paint on it right away, I'm not joking. You want to do that right now. Cut it and cover it. But that's only for then. Otherwise, it's best to leave your pruning cuts uncovered.
Okay. What about it's Minnesota? Everybody loves their tomatoes. Any tips on pruning the tomato plant?
Well, first of all, you only really need to prune your indeterminate plants. And again, if you know indeterminates keep growing all summer long and setting more fruit along the tops of the plants. So I like to always prune off the bottom 8 to 10 inches as it grows. I don't do it all at once. I don't want to shock it, but I'll just gradually keep pinching off some of the bottom branches until I've got at least 10, maybe 12 inches of bare space underneath so that air can move under there. You want that air movement always. Some people will say to remove the suckers. It seems to be a matter of choice. There's some studies that say don't. There are some studies that say, yeah. So I guess that one's going to be your call. You decide what you want to try, or try it different on 2 different tomato plants and see how you get the best results.
Okay.
But yeah, determinants, you do the minimal amount of pruning, because if you prune off too much, you're pruning off your tomato set.
Okay. For more resources?
That's the extension site to get on. And then there's a couple with the different, we talked about compost tea earlier. This is a couple of different sites, one pro, one con, to start if you want to look into more about compost tea.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you next time in the garden.
Thank you.
Thank you.